As we welcome in TSN's soccer reporter, who was there in Florida all week, Mr. Farhan Lalji.
I like the ring of that.
We'll just call him football reporter. It'll be ambiguous.
Fair enough. Works in both ways. How did you enjoy your soccer coverage experience?
Loved it. First of all, just the event itself was magnificent, right? I mean, the stadium was lame, but other than that, the atmosphere was really good, befitting of what you'd expect of a championship soccer match. And just, what a good group of guys, right? I couldn't have enjoyed being around a team and a group of fine gentlemen as much as I did. It's a good culture. It's a good group. It's, a good PR staff. They want to be accommodating, like the whole experience from the standpoint of somebody in the media, but just, somebody integrated into a group of people that you've never met before. I think it was positive. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Speaking of 1988, it's a bit of a throwback covering Major League Soccer right now, where the teams, for the most part, there's a few odd exceptions, but for the most part, they want to be covered.
Yep.
They want the coverage.
And Caps win today, Communications Department of the Year. So congratulations to Nathan Vanstone. Axel Schuster is your Executive of the Year in the MLS. They'd won another business award. So, no, it was a fantastic, fantastic season for the Caps on the pitch. But believe it or not, we are not bringing Farhan on to discuss the X's and O's of this match and how it went down.
The high press needed to be more? Is that what you're saying?
They should have won. They got robbed.
They played very, very well.
They had every opportunity. They had every opportunity to win, and you would have loved for them to put the cherry on top of the sundae, just in terms of how it's engaged the fan base. And I think the fan base here probably feels. I mean, maybe not to the same numbers or volume, but they feel probably a lot like Blue Jay fans, right?
Completely for sure.
The team is even more endearing, right? Like they've lost, but you sure would have loved for them. I mean, wouldn't have loved for that for the Blue Jays, you know me, but I would have definitely loved to see them finish this off for the fans, for the 21,000 that were at BC Place, for the 54,000 that were at BC Place before that, but just for a group of guys that really came together and believed in one another. And you can tell just how much these guys like each other just from watching them hang out in the hotel and on the elevators and getting a chance to visit, or just seeing them chirp each other. You could see this was a different group that really, really believed in one another and just enjoyed being around one another. And guess what? They'll get to do it again in 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It is a very short off season in this sport, particularly when you go all the way to MLS Cup. Here's the thing. We did not bring Farhan on to talk necessarily about what happened on the pitch. We brought him on to talk about what's going to happen from here, and particularly with a stadium project at the Hastings Racecourse site. And if you missed this on Friday, it was announced that there will be no more thoroughbred racing at Hastings Racecourse. The race book, the casino, will continue, but not actually racing on the site, which makes it a redevelopment site for this stadium. So I know you've done some reporting on this, some calls. What can you tell us, Farhan?
Well, I do think this is trending in somewhat a positive direction. I think there's still a ways to go here. I don't believe there's been any kind of agreement done and things like that. But I do think that they finally got the ear of the government, right? And I know Ken Sim was also at the game, and certainly there's a lot of motivation there. But these aren't city decisions necessarily, right? These are provincial decisions, and potentially even higher than that. But I do think that it's with the right people right now, and I just think there's a greater appetite to find a way to make this work. And I think the timing of it had to be the decision they made on the Hastings Park site, and after that, I know there's some casinos and other items at play that are going to be involved in this. My understanding is that the Lions are part of the conversation as well, which I think would be a good thing for all concerned. Again, don't know that that's official, but I do know that discussion's happened. And nonetheless, look, I think that Don Garber is going to continue to push and push and push and push. I'm not sure at what point the messaging works or hinders the process, but ultimately, I think the team has gotten to the right people. They've showed them the numbers about why this has to happen, and without it, the team's going to move. But it just feels to me a lot like the '95 Mariners, right? That team was all but gone, and they went on this epic run, and it really captured the imagination of the region, and it got the politicians involved a little more motivated to get this thing to the finish line. And I think ultimately that's what you're going to see happen here.
And in that case, it's a great comparison, first of all. And in that case, it actually worked in a lot of ways. In that, T-Mobile, as it's known now, it has not housed a great team since they built it. But for the most part, it's been reasonably full. Like the attendance has never been to a critically bad level since they built that stadium. So the old adage of if you build it, they will come has kind of worked out for the Mariners. And hey, you want to be a good, relevant team regardless, and the Whitecaps will endeavor to be that. But they do need a space to call their own. The Whitecaps and probably the Lions too. I mean, BC Place feels like a football stadium, so I'd say a little less so for them, but still, it would be nice to be in something where, hey, it makes a lot more business sense for the Lions as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately size matters, right? So you've got that in terms of what this all falls under, and I think relative to other really old stadiums, that BC Place still has relevancy, and I think it's still a good vibe and a good place to be. And maybe I'm thinking that more from a football perspective, but I think you've got a stadium that's a little too big for both teams 95% of the time. And then you've also got a lease agreement, which makes it untenable. And I know that both teams struggle with that part of it, right? So, I know the soccer folks think soccer only is kind of an important thing. And look, I'm not a soccer person, so while I disagree with that from the outside, I do think there's a place where that can work for both groups, and I think would be a good thing. And I think grass would be a good thing. And I think you need to make sure that it's covered so that spectators in this part of the world, it's not just the winter months, right? As MLS goes through a situation where, you're talking about a schedule change and what that's going to look like with December and January games in Vancouver. May can be pretty bad here as well, right? I mean, October can be pretty bad here as well. So it might wind up affecting more games and the fans more often than you might think in the early stages, right? In terms of how it's presented.
Okay, not wrong. I want to narrow in, though, on this story about the stadium, and particularly after what Patrick Johnston wrote in the province. So Mayor Ken Sim spent some time with those 2,000 Whitecaps supporters who were down in Florida, and he told them there will be some good news coming on the stadium side. Patrick reported that there is a memorandum of understanding that there's going to be a vote at some point soon here at Vancouver City Council, and it sounds like Vancouver City Council is ready to green light the Whitecaps in terms of developing that Hastings Racecourse site. So what's your understanding? They get permission to develop the site. Then what are we looking at, Farhan?
Well, there's got to be some sort of financial commitment to actually build the site, right? From as far as the stadium is concerned, and whether or not, I'll be interested to see how much development beyond the stadium is part of that MOU, right? So the city gets to make that decision, but ultimately they're going to be going to the province for some money to build said stadium, right? So does it turn into, well, you can build a lot more than just the stadium, and that's going to finance the stadium? Or, does it become the provincial government getting involved in a larger way? And just think of how much they've spent on BC Place on its renovations this time around, along with what they had to do ahead of 2011 or 2010, I should say. So, all of that's at play. But like I said, I do think that once this gets pushed through on the city side, I do think there are some sympathetic ears on the provincial government side that maybe weren't there before, right? So, like I said, that vote could happen as early as this week. And then if it does, I think, you'll really see some more additional positive momentum to get this thing going forward.
BC Place isn't coming down anytime soon. The Whitecaps and Lions need it because the stadium is going to take a long time to be built and okayed and all that sort of stuff. But 15 years from now, let's say all this goes swimmingly, and in 5 years' time there is a stadium there for at least the Whitecaps, and if it's the Lions as well, boy oh boy, then we're really talking like, what is the purpose? Can you see 15 years from now that new stadium at P&E and BC Place existing at the same time?
I don't know. It's a tough one, right? I mean, when we saw the stadiums in Seattle, now again, they built two. The Kingdom had to come down. We see in Montreal that, there's been some appetite to keep Olympic Stadium up. And I think that one has been the real eyebrow raiser because there just is nothing going on there. And it's in constant rebuild phase and where you can't do certain things there. And they continue to put money at it. And it's far away, right? Whereas this is prime downtown real estate for BC Place. Imagine what it could look like if they wind up deciding to develop that in different ways and the amount of dollars that can be attached to that, right? So there are people on the Whitecap side who tell me that the fact that the dates that are booked there for the Whitecaps, it does tend to get restrictive a little bit for BC Place, right? Just in terms of turnover and multi-day events and things like that, where it may or may not be available. And now I think that's them spinning it, saying, let's find a way to keep both, because I do think if you're the Whitecaps, there might be some games that you want to keep at BC Place if you host an MLS Cup, or if you have to play in the middle of December and January, there might be an appetite to do that. A CONCACAF Champions Cup for the Lions, a Grey Cup, or a West Final. There may be an appetite to do that. So I think they'd love for it to be there for them when needed. But I think because of where that stadium is located, I think it's a challenge. I think that's a real decision that the government's got to have in the back of its mind. That short term, to get this there, it might cost us this.
Guys, if the Lions and Whitecaps, I do want to specify both teams. If there is a stadium on the PNE site for the Lions and Whitecaps, I'm sorry, but BC Place is on borrowed time at that point. They already have more empty dates of the on the calendar than they have full dates. You just don't have enough trade shows, events, concerts that are big enough to require BC Place. At that point, it will have hosted a World Cup, an Olympics opening and closing ceremonies, and that will be that. I mean, especially if there is any public money that is going to this new stadium, you're going to have to justify that. And I
that's
think
logical,
part of how you justify
which is why that won't happen. Look at the Big O. They're putting more money into the Big O.
As much as I have my challenge, no. As much as I have my challenges with this current provincial government, BC governance is usually a little bit more straight and narrow than Quebec governance. Spend any time in the province of Quebec, and you learn a thing or two about how that place works. And
they were on the verge. They were on the verge of having that stadium named, right? Like they had a company that was ready to pay the money and do it.
And Farhan, they're going to have to give. Go ahead, finish. No, finish.
It's your show. I'm just saying that you are right in the logical argument, but there are emotional arguments that sometimes force people to make bad decisions. Right?
But you're saying emotional arguments. Like I continuously hear people shit on BC Place. I don't think it's burrowed into the hearts of British Columbians. I would like to think that, but I'm not sure that's a big enough constituency. Nor do I think it's nor do I think that any government wants to sit there with a white elephant on their hands and being continuously asked about why this piece of prime downtown real estate, as you guys say, and which is absolutely accurate, sits there with the stadium that goes so seldomly
because, Matt,
used.
You can tear down the Big O Montreal and not change the skyline of the city. That thing has been a central case. But no, not of the downtown skyline.
Not of the downtown core, but of the broader city of Montreal.
No, but
the tower stands out more than anything else.
Is the centerpiece.
It's the crown of Vancouver, downtown Vancouver.
So they're not going to tear it down.
Well, no.
I used to live in False Creek, and I would come over the Cambie Street Bridge. I would do my stand-ups from my rooftop patio when I lived in False Creek. And the stadium and Rogers Arena were the centerpieces. Like, it was right in the shot. It was my FU Toronto. It was my FU Toronto stand-up. Okay?
Very good. As it was for Dave Pratt.
As the folks in he never came to my house. As the folks in Toronto used to call it. That said, if I go to that same spot, I can't see the stadiums anymore. When I come over the Cambie Street Bridge, I remember taking my son's German friend to the Whitecaps Dallas game, the final regular season game, because he wanted to meet Muller, and we were able to make that happen. And I'm like, oh, you got to see what it looks like when you come over the bridge. Couldn't see the stadium. The skyline has changed 10 times over.
Okay, so it's a $500 million piece of art. I mean, Van Gogh and Monet would be happy to get.
Not arguing with the should. It's just the will I'm arguing.
But we're getting off track.
Me too.
We're getting off track. The other important thing about the Hastings site is the casino license, which, if you read that Hastings Racecourse release, said the casino license will continue to remain with the racecourse, but or with there'll still be a race book, whatever Hastings Racecourse turns into. But the casino license is almost a necessary part of any kind of redevelopment of that site, right? Like, that's also one of the ways how you finance it.
For sure.
Fair?
Yeah, I think there's a there's a hotel part of that argument as well, or part of that conversation as well.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely right. And when you know, in terms of who the land actually belongs to and what needs to happen in terms of development, yeah, I think the casino is a significant part of it. But it adds more fuel to the fact that this thing is going to go forward at some point.
Yeah,
there was already BC Transit plans coming over the Second Narrows Bridge too. That can get fast tracked. I mean, really, that's a part of town that would really thrive with something
absolutely
attached to it.
People have made the comparisons. Large scale, something like LA Live, which has really revitalized downtown Los Angeles. Smaller scale that Farhan would be accustomed to, but the Lansdowne site in our nation's capital, which was viewed as bad stadium, bad part of town, blah, blah, blah. They gave them development license. It's an entertainment district now, and now people are very happy to go to that part of town to watch their football. So the casino license is key here. The other thing that's key here, Farhan, as I understand it, and I know you were around Whitecaps ownership a little bit this weekend, I don't think Kerfoot and Mallet are doing this on their own. Right? Like, I think they need a partner, and a very well-heeled partner, if it's going to be a development site. Because at that point, you're talking about an extraordinary amount of money that's going to be required on the front end. Fair?
Yeah, I would think so. And whether that's, you know, there are some people in this province that I think would be approached, and people who know how to develop and get something like this done. You know, Amar Doman certainly has a level of resource as well. He's not in the development business, but, you know, is connected to people that are. So if the Lions are involved, I think that's going to be part of it as well. But yeah, you're right. They're not just going to develop it themselves. They are going to need some additional partners to make this work. And, you know, these conversations have been happening for a lot of time. So I do believe that it wouldn't take long to find said partners.
Really? That's quite optimistic, because it's not like BC and Vancouver is at a, you know, it's not like development is a gangbusters business right now. We've had projects that have even stopped because they can't sell them. But it's different.
Right, but there are some, yeah, residential is different than commercial. And there are some that will just make the investment now, and the value might be provided at a lower number, right? Knowing that eventually in this market, it is going to climb again.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, you've mentioned it several times here, and I want to pin down on this as well. We had Amar Doman on the show a month ago, Farhan, and he said to us, the Lions need more capacity than the Whitecaps. He used the figure 30,000. Which, of course, not only works for him in terms of what they could get for just any given game day, particularly the opener if a concert's going to go with it, but also be big enough to host a Grey Cup. Whitecaps are talking closer, or had been talking closer to 20,000. So what's the news there? Like, why are the Lions a part of this now when, as recently as a month ago, Amar Doman had his doubts because of stadium capacity side?
Yeah, look, it's a fair question, and I haven't talked to Amar on this file in the last few weeks. So, but I have to think there's a compromise there, don't you? Like, yes. I mean, if the government is willing to do this and get involved, is the compromise 25,000, 24,000, but make sure there's spaces in place so that it's expandable, so that when you have the larger events, I mean, it would behoove the Whitecaps if all of a sudden they're hosting MLS Cup and Champions Cup, and 15 years from now, BC Place is no longer there, that becomes an option. If the Canadian national team is playing large events here, that becomes an option. So I understand the need to be smaller and to control demand. And when you look at some of the other CFL stadiums, you know, Winnipeg and Saskatchewan are just above 30, and it works. But you look at Saskatchewan all of a sudden, and they're rarely at that 30 mark. And so what does that look like on television? And can you raise ticket prices with lower demand? So I do think there's a formula there where they can find some sort of common ground. But I do know you're right. That has been the stumbling block for quite some time. And hopefully they're able to find a way to bridge it, because I think this works better with both teams.
First of all, I'd seen those reports, guys. I really don't think there has been any credibility to this 19,000 number for the Whitecaps. That is not my understanding at all. In fact, talking to league sources around MLS, there is only regret for the teams that have built 17 to 19,000 seat stadiums to this point. They all have immediate buyer's remorse that they did not build bigger stadiums in those locales. To me, it's the absolute smallest would be a 21,000 seat stadium. But I think 24 or 25, as you outlined, Farhan, is absolutely a reasonable compromise. And I think given what the Whitecaps saw this year with the support, that's probably turned them even more so to say, yeah, we can still keep this place mostly full if it's at 24,000, 25,000.
You're probably right, but there is another side to it, right? Like, will there always be a Thomas Muller type player in the building? And look, it accelerated, right? Because when you went to Whitecap games, it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily full until Muller got here, right? And then all of a sudden, it was legitimately at 25,000 that they were then able for a playoff game to get to 32,000, and then eventually 54,000. But a lot of things had to line up. And will they always line up that way? Certainly, you look at the way this organization is run right now and what Axel Schuster's been able to do, on the back end in terms of just what their process is, and you have to feel good about their future on the field and what they're going to be able to deliver. And there's going to be I don't want to say hangover, that's the wrong word, because it's just all positive vibes coming off of this season that'll help them next year. But 10 years down the road, you don't know if there's a dip, and you don't know if it gets back down to the high teens in terms of actual attendance, right? So. But look, I'm with you. I think slightly bigger is better.
Just two other things I want to get to on this.
And one of them better be Thomas Muller.
Okay. Do you know that
he loves
Farhan has a new romance, and his name is Thomas Muller? He
Farhan's now
so
put in
charmed by Thomas
Farhan's
Muller.
adding an umlaut to Lalji, apparently.
Yeah. If you know anything about Farhan, it's his dog Luna, his wife and kids, depending on how their relationships
Muller's
are going
making
at the
inroads
time.
there, though, even.
Muller may be second in the power rankings when this is all said and done. No, but here's the thing.
Could you imagine? Like, I did a post-game interview with him after a championship loss match. I asked two questions. He gave me 3.5 minutes on two questions. Can you imagine how many questions I'd have to ask a member of the Canuck leadership group to get 3.5 minutes?
Okay. That was the necessary price of doing this.
61 questions.
Wanted to be able
the answer
to
is 61 questions.
No, but when this issue,
it's true though. I couldn't watch. I couldn't experience what I did for 5 days without watching it through the lens of the other experience. And
yes,
oh boy.
Okay, nobody cares about your Media One.
Sir.
When this project first started, and the notion of the province putting money into this. I was very, very skeptical because of the political fallout on that. As we know, in Canada, it has been very difficult to get governments to put money into stadium projects for teams owned by billionaires. You talk about the province maybe getting involved here on the stadium. When I think of it now, there may be no better time for David Eby to do this. He's got a recent mandate, right? He's not facing an election for several years. He's already pretty disliked, let's face it. And the Conservative Party of British Columbia is in total disarray.
There is no opposition.
They just had a coup of their leader last week. Look, if I'm David Eby's advisor, I would say to him, Mr. Premier, if you put money into a stadium, you're going to hear about that the next time you're on the campaign trail, and that may, in fact, hurt you at the ballot box. But if you're going to do it, this might be the best time to do it.
It's not very NDP-ish, though, is it?
It's not very NDP-ish at
sports
all.
Venue. No.
Because here's the other thing. It's not like the Whitecaps are going to be asked to buy the land. So you're already going to have the city sort of doing its part with, well, we'll give you the opportunity to develop this prime piece of real estate, and then Mayor Ken Sim can step back and go, okay, we've done our part. And then it becomes the province, and I'm told they do have some jurisdictional overview over that site, that it's not purely a city decision, but then it becomes the province, okay, what's going to be your contribution, if any, to this project?
Yeah, look, I think that in terms of how this is allowed to be developed, I think the province is going to be involved. But let's look at this another way. Think of how much is being spent on the World Cup, right? Just in terms of infrastructure and security. And think of the pushback that came at the front end there, to the point where we almost didn't have games in Vancouver, and then it got turned. And I'm telling you, the money that was
different premier, but you're quite right. Different premier, but you're quite right.
But when you look at the funds that were allocated to that, I can certainly see a world where a number south of that gets allocated to this project. And I don't even think it'll be close to that, but I think it'll be meaningful. But what are we talking about, right? I mean, the number for that started with a B, right? So in terms of what it's eventually going to cost.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, there's
two ways to look at that, Farhan, though. It could be like, they spent all this money on the World Cup, and so they should be able to spend this for something that is permanent, not temporary.
Yes.
The other argument is, look at all the money they already put into soccer. If I'm a citizen who doesn't give a shit about soccer, am I going to sit there and go, put more money into soccer? No.
But the other thing is if you don't invest in this, how long are we looking at a dilapidated Hastings race course and barns that are just sitting there? Like,
something has to go there, Blake.
But
as we have long talked about, if you put that's why the entertainment district is so important. A sports stadium only appeals to so many people, and it's a minority of people.
Doesn't have to be just that, though.
So it's got to be the entertainment district.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's my last question for you, because as you noted, Farhan, MLS is going to a spring schedule, or spring, summer, through the winter, not summer. They are going to a schedule that aligns, with global soccer, in that you start in the summer and you go through until the next spring, and you have your months off in like June and July. That puts them in an awful lot of Vancouver rain. And if the Lions are involved with that puts a lot of big, burly football players on a grass pitch in the pouring rain, chewing it the hell up for the soccer team in its next match. I guess they're going to would have to be super creative and cooperative, including with people like TSN and the CFL broadcast schedule, in terms of Lion home games being far enough apart from Whitecaps
and
home
hybrid
games.
Grass, Matt. They do this quite easily with hybrid grass. It's half and half. It stands at is BMO the best soccer pitch in the league? Nope, but they make it work. It's just fine, and both teams play there.
Thoughts, Farhan?
Yeah, no, I agree. It would have to be hybrid, and also, the CFL season is slowly moving up, right? To Grey Cup now being in early November, so there's a little bit of October conflict there, but from everything you hear from
October,
and the Lions don't want to play a lot in the summer. Right, so you'd hope that the Whitecaps are fairly summer heavy. Actually, sorry, summer they don't even get. They're going to be what's their mid-season break? Yeah, so. I know the Whitecaps prefer fall games, but that'll obviously get moved up a little bit, just given the landscape of the CFL calendar. But you're right; they are going to have to find a way to have some room between those games and work together on the schedule. And when there's nothing else going into that stadium that they also have to work around, that probably becomes a little bit more easier.
And do a canopy. Have it open air, but do a canopy.
Sounds like Luna does not abide on that.
No. You guys have she's tired of your voices. But
yeah, exactly. She wants Dad back.
No, well, you know what? You do, because listen, when we go back to 2010, 2011, right? First of all, that stadium was temporary, so it always kind of felt like camping. But when we got into fall games for either team, that affected attendance. So you absolutely need to find a way to cover everything for all the fans involved if you want to find a way to make this work. I mean, look, it's too bad you don't have the funds available here to make this a covered but not enclosed retractable type thing, but you can't really do that for a stadium as small as 25 to 28,000.
I think you need a retractable. That's where I was getting at, guys. I think you need a retractable roof that sort of works like T-Mobile or Rogers Center, where you can actually close it during the game and give your spectators and the pitch some cover.
But the end zones, it doesn't need to be a dome. Like, it's not enclosed. It's just a canopy.
Exactly. Kind of like what they have at some of these hybrids. SoFi is one, T-Mobile's another.
SoFi's the one. SoFi, when I've gone there for certain events, you could, and at the odd time it rains in LA, you could actually feel the rain coming into the stadium. I don't know that that's good, but look, if there was the financing available to add that to this, I think that'd be a huge win.
Well, I think that's something.
Stop moving my stand, dog.
Can we get a photo? Can we get a photo of beautiful? Can we get the camera on beautiful Luna? Let everyone know who we're talking about here.
She's a little sour.
Hi, girl. Okay, we're gonna give you Dad back now. Yeah, okay.
Take me out.
It's walk time at the Lalji House.
Walk time.
Thank you for this, buddy. It was great hanging out with you as well.
Great job this weekend.
Very well done.
Hey, where were you? Are you up there? I can't remember.
I was in Dawson Creek. I was in Dawson Creek.
I got the better end of the deal in Miami, but let me say this before I go. I wish you, Blake, 4 or 5 concentrated days with the BC Lions and those athletes as well, because they also want to be covered. They're great dudes.
I said that to whoever would listen. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 4 or 5 days where you just got to spend that time with them. You need to come to a Grey Cup. And
we used to do camp. We used to do training camp all those years.
Last year.
We did it all.
Hey.
All right.
Thank you, Farhan and Luna. That's Farhan and Luna Lalji from their abode.
Yeah.